Thanks, Debbie. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining this session on unlocking value from your implementations, continuous improvement process that we execute here at HSO. I've got my colleagues Grant and Peter here to take you through what we can offer. And hopefully we'll come back at the end with any questions you have, and you can have a look at what we do here at HSO. So if I pass it over to my colleagues.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks, Chris. So let me start by introducing ourselves, talking a little bit about what we mean by the platform that we're looking at and why we think there is a particular challenge in terms of getting the most out of it from a capability point of view. Microsoft invest currently about £30 billion a year in the technology that drives Dynamics 365 and runs the wider set of services in the Azure cloud across both the sort of application components of Power Apps, Power BI and AI solutions, but also the integration, data analytics and sort of decision-making tools within the Azure suite themselves. To put this in a bit of perspective, that's 1.6 million of investment over the course of this lunch and learn call, and all of this is directly contributing to the capabilities that you can use coming out of Microsoft. But just because they're building them and deploying them either as new features and functions within the business applications you use or new services and capabilities within the technology platform, it's not a given that that turns into value from your business, that actually changes processes, changes behaviors, and changes the way you operate based on the technology that you've got. To actually make that jump between the Microsoft R&D and the new releases that they are continuously throwing at us really every few weeks these days or even more, you've got to have a process and a set of capabilities in place in your organization that translates that into new ways of working and really sort of drives your workforce to pick those up and run with them in a way that's useful and valuable to your organization. And what we see a lot of the time still is people behaving really with Dynamics 365 and the Microsoft Applications Platform a little bit more as they used to with traditional ERP. Yes, technology moves on, but you don't do a lot with it until the next major evolution of your business systems. When you go through a big change, you lump in as many requirements as you can possibly get to that project, you deliver them, and then you sit on it. And as the technology continues to evolve, actually, your own solutions and your own implementation doesn't. And that gap between where you can go with technology and what you're using and what you're seeing widens over time. And in fact, in practice, it's a little bit worse than that, because as people leave your organization and sort of workarounds accrue, as manual processes start to develop on the side of technology, actually traditionally over the space of, say, 5 to 10 years, your applications and your use of technology can slightly degrade rather than even sort of stay consistent, never mind keep pace with technology and what's going on. You'll make some changes over that time, but it's not necessarily a coherent roadmap that really understands where the value is, makes the most out of the roadmap coming out of the Microsoft and other technology providers, and ensures that it's strategic in its delivery rather than a little bit transactional in terms of keeping pace with small changes. So what we need to look at is the development of a continuous improvement service. Is how do we continually take the changes coming from Microsoft, translate that into new ways of working, new features and new functions and new behaviors from our staff. And to do that, we need 3 primary components. The first is we need to make a decision about what we're doing. And into that decision-making process go a large number of factors that we'll talk about to get to a roadmap. Secondly, I've got to be able to deliver. And there's not just one component to that delivery. there's a broad range of skills and expertise and types of services that you need to gather together to be able to build effectively across a platform. And third is you've actually got to do something with that. So you've got to have a mechanism by which you are allowing people to get the most out of this. I think, with every new technology coming out, you'll all recognise there will be some people in your organisation that jump on it, play around with it, find ways of getting the most out of it and really grab it, and other people that will resist way past the point of proof. Microsoft Copilot, for anyone using that, is a great example of that, where some people will, just about use it for Teams meetings, and other people will have it generating half their documents and scheduling most of their activities within the organisation. So for each of these, we need to think about it as a cycle. These aren't one-off activities we do where, every year or two we sit down and think, right, we're going to define a roadmap, we're going to run a few projects, and then we're going to finish, and that will be the end of this. To make this work, we've got to have this running on a cycle where we are constantly defining a backlog of changes, prioritizing those in line with business needs and capabilities and ability to execute, and embedding those changes, taking the signals from what works and what doesn't, and restarting that loop of backlog and roadmap management. Through that, there are different skills involved in those different areas. The sort of work you need to do to build the backlog is not the same as actually building workflows, automating steps of your process, creating AI agents that go into the solution. And that in turn is a different set of skills from the people that can champion that within your organization and help actually articulate the value of that change to the people using the tools. So the first step is building that roadmap, and there are a number of different areas that go into that. The two sort of primary ones, I would say, are the strategic priorities from your organization to create really clear guidance about what is important to change, where does the value come from technology in line with supporting business practices, and secondly, the technology roadmap itself. Actually understanding at a deep level what are the new features and functions that are coming out, how do they relate to each other, and how do you assemble a number of these new capabilities to build something really valuable to you as an organization. And AI agents are a particularly good case in point from this. You can understand what you can build with agentic services within Azure, but unless you really understand how to connect that into your applications, how to build supporting data sets that enable good quality decision making, and how to surface that through some of the Power Apps or the other UI technologies that present this directly to users and make it accessible, you can't get the most out of any one component of that technology. You've got to be able to design in a way that understands all of these different capabilities. And then you've got to be practical about it. You've got to think about what delivery capabilities you have, what dependencies there are between these different parts of technology and delivery, and then how to apply that into your organization. So what does that mean in the context of your operating model, and when you combine it with the process change and what you will actually ask people to do differently. So that's the first piece, is saying in the context of the organization, the technology it has, the processes it runs, the priorities that it's looking at, what shall we do, and what of those changes has value and sits within our roadmap. Once we've got that decision, we've got to have a way of actually delivering the change.
Yeah, and so as Peter said then, we've built this fantastic roadmap, you set your priorities, we understand the technology changes coming out, but now we've got the actual challenge of doing that delivery. And I think of all the elements that Peter's spoken about there, you've got to look at all the different cross-functional teams that you need to do that. So it's not just a functional consultant, it's got devs in there, it's got some AI people in there, it's got some Azure specialists in there. All of these coming together to create a planning cycle to get that going. So the days of just having functional consultants do this work is sort of disappearing, and the breadth of that team that we'll speak about in a little bit is going on. And Pete mentioned this early on as well. there is this pace of change that you need to do to keep up with it. So just outside of the standard releases from Microsoft and consuming all that great investment that they're doing, taking all of those into work packets, delivering that through this continuous improvement. And whether you're doing that a piece at a time, or whether you're doing that in sort of a continuous sprint kind of agile cycle of understanding what's coming up, having it planned, releasing it in. What this sort of slide here is trying to show to you is this ever going, ever cycle of planning cycle into that sort of delivery and realization cycle and back into planning again. So it's not this one and done, as sort of Pete mentioned earlier on, in this legacy phase of we'll wait for the next thing to come. It's constantly taking that roadmap in that stage before, bringing this into this sort of development stage, delivery stage, and really building that into a clear sort of plan so that you can realize that release of value into your business much quicker through these different teams, through these people. And that could be a blend of your in-house teams or working with a partner such as HSO to do some of these sorts of things. So the next bit that Pete's going to talk through is then what does that team look like? So how do you build this? Because we've mentioned quite a few different people, quite a few different skill sets in it. So Pete?
Sure. So across the technology side, it's ever more intertwined between the different types of skill sets you need. And actually, as these technologies have grown and developed, the skill sets have specialised even further within that. So as Grant said, before you might have had a functional consultant and they would work across a large chunk of your core ERP or business application. Now, actually, a lot of the time, the change within the core application is minimised and the value comes from building around the outside. Taking events happening within Dynamics 365, running them through Power Automate as a workflow, presenting data in Power BI that's based on data sets built within Azure Data Services, demonstrating that to a user through Power Apps, and then enabling them to take a change that runs through integration services back into Dynamics. And in each of those cases, the skill sets you need tend to be isolated to an individual. So actually, to build a change around Dynamics is not one person sat there for 2 weeks. It's 10 people doing a couple of hours work or half a day's work on each of their own areas that combines to build a solution. Obviously, as you're doing that, you've got to be able to test it and to make sure it's going to work across all of those different areas, that it doesn't have any sort of impact on the existing processes other than the ones you want, and that it's something that you're going to be able to explain to users and to support and to roll out. So when we talk about these sort of requirements for continuous improvement, you've got to think about the breadth of skills you need in your organisation, and crucially, sort of which ones it makes sense to support full-time and which ones you might want to rely on a partner to provide. And that will change over time as you concentrate on different areas of your business and different parts of your existing technology stack.
I think to add to that as well, so you've got this delivery and you'll see in the bottom part there, we've got the managed services. It's then about going, it's fantastic, we've released these new functionalities, these changes, these processes. It's then about going, are we set up and do we have the right people around to then take that into BAU, manage that and feed back into that how it's working? Are we still getting value from it? What bits of upcoming deprecated features are about to disappear? So that you need this team also post the delivery of these continuous changes to actually make sure your business is still running as well. So that's why we've got the support, we've got the one version releases, and really importantly, that testing as a service in there. So how are you testing this new functionality? How are you making sure that this change is going to go into your business in a safe way and actually provide the value you really want it to, rather than the change going in and causing you more problems because it's not being tested correctly as well.
And the other side of that is being able to take that feedback loop that Grant describes and run through it at speed. I think one of the biggest blockers to actually taking continuous change is the speed with which you can go through the steps. If every iteration is going to take you 3 months worth of work to get a small optimization off the ground, to deliver it, to embed it, to get it in support and consider the next one, your pace of change is so slow that each iteration becomes harder to start, more contentious for the business to agree what's in it, and much slower to add value out of the other end of it. So throughout all of this process, the speed with which you can run through the cycle is quite critical to ensuring that you actually get the most out of this platform. And then throughout all of it, you absolutely have to think about change management and the people side. It's fine to talk about the technology and how we'll enable that from a process point of view, but at the end of the day, delivering new features, particularly through AI, that start to enable a very different way of working in some of your processes, requires quite a significant effort from a change management point of view to get people not just to behave ever so slightly differently, but in some cases quite fundamentally differently within the processes that they're responsible for running day to day. And to do that, your change management needs to be thoroughly embedded in your ways of working, so that building a shared vision is happening early on. The sort of implications on individuals and what it means for them is well articulated. The local wins are celebrated as you start to release any of this, and the value across the organisation, not just for a role that might have to work differently, but for an entire end-to-end process, is really clearly understood by all of the people involved. And that way, when you start to bring it all together, you say, well, we're going to have an ability to decide what to do. And that ability is going to have control. It's going to make sure that we're not going off down sort of dead ends in terms of technology or business process change. And it's going to make sure we have a very clear focus on the value that any of this technology investment is going to bring to the organisation. Secondly, we're going to have a rapid ability to deliver change so that we can afford multiple iterations of those change to incrementally work towards new processes, new services, and the delivery of that value. And thirdly is we're going to make sure we actually realise that value. That at the final step where we are dependent on the users and the people within our organisations, we've got really effective strategies for how we run that process. From the HSO point of view, the first one is enterprise architecture as a service, where we have the ability to support and shape that decision-making process. We then have the continuous improvement service, which is around the augmentation of internal teams to put together that breadth of skills that enables development across the platform, and then our change management function that sits across all of those areas, working on the messaging, the user adoption, and the realization of those values.
Great. Thanks for that, Pete and Grant. Thanks to everyone for attending today's webinar. And I hope that gave you a better idea on how HSO go about unlocking more of a continuous value from your implementation and really getting value out of the investment you've already made. If there's any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat or after we close this recording, which will go online. A special thanks to our presenters. And if you have any feedback or any questions, or you wish to reach out and understand this a bit more, you can reach out to anyone on this call. Your account manager, SDM, if you have one, and there'll also be a link in the chat to give feedback, which will also invite you to, if you wish to have any further contact from us.